Okay.
Not sure if it's just him.
It should be okay now. Oh, let's do the intro again there then. So, my name is Nick Taylor. I'm a lead software engineer at Forem. Forem is the software that powers dev. Something always goes wrong.
Hey, there, yay. And I'm Christina Gorton, the open source community manager at Forum. And today, as Nick said just a minute ago, I'm the guest. I'm going to be teaching you all animations. Yay. And walking through them with Nick on some of our new Forum branding. So, hello, everyone. We are going to be looking at SVGs. If you don't know what those are, you'll learn in a minute. And we're also going to look at how to animate, do an animation both in CSS and then how you might be able to do it in JavaScript. So that's what we're going to be working through today. Anything you want to say first, Nick, before we get started?
Uh, just that I really like the new forum branding, and I like the emotes because you can play around with them and stuff. So it's
Yeah.
kind of like these little Legos, which is pretty fitting given that we're going to be doing animations. So yeah, so I guess let's get to it, Christina. So yeah, just zoomed in there. So we're
Yep.
going to be working out of CodePen. CodePen has this really cool feature where you can collaborate in the browser. We're also going to be using Figma. We might as well start there, I guess, Christina.
Yeah.
Okay.
So usually when I work with SVGs, a lot of times I'll use something called Affinity Designer. It's similar to Adobe Illustrator, but cheaper. It's a one-time cost. But when I'm working with other people, I a lot of times will use Figma because it's free and everyone can use it, and you can do a lot of the same stuff as you can with other things. I'm just used to Affinity and how to work with it, and so that's why I like using it. But you can also do all these things with Figma. So I just kind of want to go through like my process of what I do when I start thinking through an animation and what you have to do sometimes with SVGs if you're going to create animation, because a lot of times we get them from designers or we create them ourselves and they're not exactly ready for animation. So
Yeah.
that happened with this one here. This one wasn't too bad. We have a white
Okay.
version that I was like going to have to completely like redo because it was just like all one giant path instead of separate things. So I can show you
Okay.
like when I'm clicking on these, they're all little separate paths. And the white one we had was all just one giant path, and I was like, that's not going to be fun to animate. So
Okay.
well, that's fun.
Uh,
And then the other, go
can
ahead.
I stop? Can I stop you for one sec? Just because not everybody might be familiar with SVG. So when you're talking about paths, what do you mean
Hmm.
exactly?
Yeah, so SVGs are made up of, it's math. So it's made from math, but the math you can create what's called paths or shapes. So they have built in shapes like circle or square that you can use. And then a path just means from one area to the next. If you're thinking of like math, just like a line, one dot to the next dot. And so these ones are created as paths. You can see on the side, I think, if you drop down the form magic mark up
Okay.
there on page 1,
Oh yeah.
it, it should like drop down if
Oh
you
yeah.
click on
Yeah.
it.
Yeah.
And
I
there's
gotcha.
yeah.
Okay. Ah. Okay. Okay.
Yeah, so they're just like little vectors, is what it says on here. Again, math vector. Um, so you can take these little paths and you can either create them with shapes. So they have like a shape tool in Figma, which you won't be able to use right now because I think you're just in view mode. But they do have
Okay.
like shapes like, I could bring one up. Let's see. If I just did like a square, there's a square. And then when I export that, you would see that it would say square inside the code.
Okay.
So those are just like the building blocks of an SVG.
Yeah. And the
Okay.
and in Figma, like we're like, well, you imported this, I guess, or you pasted it in.
Hmm.
But what was I gonna say? I think somebody just gave us a follow. I did not see it. Thank you for the follow. Um, yeah, so uh, you're in here working on it, but you can export it. Like if you look on the right there too, there's like some CSS and
Hmm.
stuff if you want. When you, what's your typical process? Like I've used Figma, so I'm not usually working it. I'm more a consumer of like the output. but so
Mhm.
I'll typically just export the SVG, but is there other
Mhm.
things you do in terms of exporting, or you just go straight like export SVG normally, or?
Yeah, I'll show you as soon as we group this stuff, kind of like
Okay.
the process of what I do to export and then taking out and optimizing before we put it in for like code.
Okay, cool.
All right, so what I typically do right now, everything's just separate, so you can see it all just says vector, vector, vector.
Yeah,
You can take that when you export it out, you'll just see like path, path, path in your code. The element is called a path, and it doesn't really tell you anything other than you have a bunch of paths. So I like to group things I know I'm going to animate together. So say this F here for Forem, I would group that. Um,
okay.
and with Figma, you can just click each one and then hit Command G, or I'm assuming Control G if you're in Windows. And then that groups that all together.
Yeah.
And then I take that group and I usually name it something. So for this, we'll keep it simple and just name it F because it's an F. Yay. And then we know that, okay, when I go into my code, it will have a path element and it will have an ID. So if you name something in these editors where you can edit SVGs, you
Yeah.
can export the names as IDs. And
Okay.
so then you have a way to quickly find it within, the DOM or whatever you're trying to use it for.
Okay.
Um, and then if I know I'm going to be animating individual parts or different parts, a lot of times I'll give those names too. So I know with like the F here, oh, why does this F have part of the M in it? Hold
Good
on, did I
question.
click the wrong stuff
We're making up
when
new
I
letters
grouped
on the
this?
stream here. There's actually 27 letters in the English alphabet now.
Oh, never mind. I see. I see what happened. It just collapsed. We're good.
Okay.
It just collapsed on me. Okay, so within the F, I would also take this and I would put like F, like a lowercase f1, or you can think of better names, but this is just like a quick, easy thing for me to do. So taking it
Okay.
and saying like F1 and then F2. The thing with these is that you can't give them classes. So you do
Okay.
have to give like special names because otherwise it's all just going to be the same. And it's an ID, so you want it to have different names. And when I export them out, a lot of times I'll go back and give them classes. So I just like to know where they are in the code, so it's easy
Yeah.
for me to find. So I can go back and I can change that if I need to.
Okay, so the limitation on not adding a class is really just within Figma, but once you've got it out of Figma, it's just regular markup, and we can use any
Hmm.
kind of selector to access these things.
Yeah.
Okay, cool.
And I don't think we'll go through and like group everything, but I would tell you that that's what I would do is I would go through and I'd figure out like what am I going to group? What do I want to have as like what do I know I'm going to animate? If I think even that I might animate it at some point, I will give it a ID because otherwise I'll probably have to come back to my editor, create an ID, export it all again because it
Okay.
can be very hard to find within your code if you have like this is a smaller SVG when we export it, you'll see, so it's not that bad. You can usually just like inspect it and find and add something. But if you have like a really big SVG and a lot of parts to it, you just want to go ahead and name anything you think you might animate just to save any headaches for later.
Okay.
Um, so I would have, with this one, and what I did do, and we'll see in a little bit in the code, is that I did group the F, the O, the R, the E, and the M together in the one that I exported that we have inside of CodePen already.
Yeah. Just
Um,
switch
but
those out.
just, but first to talk about the exporting,
Okay,
just so
yeah,
that
for
you
sure.
kind of know. I think I'm not sure if it will show on yours. I may have to give you different permissions. But the only thing I do differently is that one, I just make sure everything's grouped, like I said, and then I group the whole thing together so that it's just one big SVG afterwards. So FOREM would all be grouped into one group as well. And then oh, there it is. You can see it. So instead
Yeah.
of PNG, if you hit SVG and then hit those three little dots on the side,
Okay.
this is important if you're working in Figma. You want to include your ID attributes because if you don't, all that time you spent naming things would just go away. And a lot of these like SVG editors are like that. You have to like be aware that like sometimes they're just going to try, because they're trying to optimize and they're trying to get rid of code and not have as much. They'll give you the option to like do it without the IDs, but then you just wasted a whole bunch of time. So make sure that you click include ID attribute, and then you just export it. So you can hit export.
Okay. Export. Okay, then I can just call it for logo or something, and then
Yep.
okay, cool. And I guess I mean that obviously you want the IDs to be able to move different parts of the SVG, but I imagine it would be extremely difficult to identify what the pieces are if the IDs didn't get exported with it. Like, because it's like all the paths are like just a long set of like I think they're comma
Yeah.
committed numbers, so like you would have no idea that this is the F or that's like it's kind of
Yeah.
hard to tell like with the eyeball, I'm guessing.
Yeah, so unless it's like something really, really simple, or like you have like a circle or a square, then that will tell you individually. But if it just says path, then you would have to inspect and find it, like
Okay.
hover over the SVG and find each part, and then you can go into your code and find the same, like find out where that was in the code. So like counting, like, oh wait, it's 5 paths down, and then adding an ID, which I've done many, many times. I've had to do this. I actually did this today, but
Yeah, yeah.
um it's not as fun as just being able to like name it right there in your Figma.
I,
And then the next thing I do, since you have a Forem logo down there, is that I go to a website called SVG OMG.
okay, yeah. Yeah, we use that at Forum too in one of our it's in our pre-commit hook, I think.
Mhm.
Okay. All right. So at this point, I'll want to open my SVG.
You can either open it or you can drag the file that's on the bottom down there into it, like
Oh
that's
yeah.
in your download on the bottom.
Oh, I didn't know I could do that.
Yep.
I learned something about my browser today. All right, cool.
Okay, and so another important thing here, if you've never used this before, like mine has presets already that I know, like it always comes back up the same presets.
Mhm.
Um, you want to, one, prettify your markup. So up at the top, that will just make your markup readable when you like have it in like your code editor. Instead of just being like one line of code, it will be, nice looking so that you can read it. And then there's a thing that says clean IDs.
Oh
You want
yeah.
to not have that as well, so that you, again, have all your names there. They're actually there. There's a lot of other ones that you can play around with and decide how much you want to like optimize. The nice thing about SVG OMG versus some of the other ones that you can use, because there's other ones you can use for this, is that you can see what happens if
Okay.
you like take things away, because sometimes some of the stuff that you're like optimizing for, it will change the look of your SVG, depending on how much you're optimizing and what you're getting rid of. So it's nice to have this to be able to see like what's going to happen if I do that.
Yeah.
And then you can see the savings down there. So there's a certain amount of savings, how much it's been optimized, and you can just hit that little arrow to re-download it.
Okay, here we go. Form logo there. Now if I open it, there we go. We've got a SVG logo that's rendering in the browser. The gray, I guess the gray background, that's just me when I exported it. I probably shouldn't have included the gray in.
A lot of times, I may have, no, I didn't have it on this one, but usually a lot of times I will have some kind of background. So the background a lot of times is what's called the view box. And depending on how big your view box is how much room you have to like animate in. And if you don't have a big enough view box, your animation will go outside of that. And then that's where you see like animations like cut off and stuff sometimes. So a lot of times I do export with some kind of like background, and then I just get rid of it in my code because it's really easy to find. Usually it's just like a
Okay.
rectangle up at the top that says like rectangle, and then you just get rid of that.
Okay.
But it's okay that you have this here. I do think you should just open this, or let's go ahead and go into CodePen, because then I can show you what the code looks like of like one that I actually like put together.
Okay. Here
And
we
you can just make the HTML section like big and like move everything else for right now.
go. There we go. In the matrix, I feel like I'm reading. Yeah. Okay.
Okay, so one thing you might be able to notice, you might I don't know how big it is on Twitch right now, how much they can see, but you might want to make
I'll
it a
zoom
little
in.
bit bigger. There we go.
Yeah, cool.
Okay. So something I did do was when I exported this, I opened this in like VS Code, and then I went through and I found where I had the IDs on my individual like pieces of letters, and I gave them classes because I knew I wanted to animate certain parts all at the same time. And if they just had a class, it's easier to just say I want to animate the M class or the E class versus I want to animate ID M3 and ID M2. So that's why I did that.
Okay.
But the other, yeah. So you can see, let's just talk about a few elements in SVG. We don't have to get too technical with this, but you can see what I was talking about, the path element. So the path there just means, and if you really want to get technical, that M there that you see right after the D, that just means like where it's going to start. And then the Z at the end of the line of code there is like where it's going to end. So these are just coordinates. It's saying we're starting here, going to the next coordinate, next coordinate, next coordinate, and then we're ending at that last coordinate. And then a few other things to note. I wanted to animate this so that it had a stroke animation. In our original SVG and Figma, if you want to go back real quick, I know we're kind of switching screens a lot.
No worries, no worries. If I can't tab through browser tabs, I should probably quit my job right now.
Okay, so when I click on this this top little F part, it has a fill, but it doesn't have a stroke at all. And so I actually did this for like an hour yesterday when I was like, oh, I want to animate this and I want to do this animation. And I just wasn't even thinking, just so you all know, I do this all the time on stuff. I was like trying to animate forever this logo. And I was like, why is this stroke animation not happening? And then I realized I don't even have a stroke on here. There's no stroke on this element. So yeah, so I got rid of the one that's actually in CodePen, which you don't have to switch yet, but the one that's in CodePen, it doesn't have a fill, it has a stroke now instead. So that was the other thing I changed from our logo that I had to take time to go through and change, was like to get rid of all the fills and add a stroke instead so that I could create the type of animation that I wanted.
Okay, cool. And for the folks at home who might be new to SVG or somewhat familiar with it, so fill color is like a background color on an HTML element, like a div or something, or and the stroke is kind of like the border, I guess. It would it's not equivalent, but it's something.
Yep.
It looks like a border to me.
Yeah. Yeah, it's basically like the border. So you can see here on this top one now, I got rid of what was called the fill, which would be like your background color with an SVG. And you'll probably do this a lot if you're working with SVGs and you want to like change the color. You'll put background color, pink, and nothing happens. And you're like, why isn't that happening? It's because you have to use fill for an SVG. And then if you want some kind of like border, you have to use stroke. And so that's what's there. What I did for the other one that we have in our CodePen is that I did go through and do just like that top one there, where I got rid of the fill.
Okay.
And I gave it a stroke so that I can then animate that instead of the fill.
Gotcha. Okay, cool. So should we move back to CodePen or?
Yeah.
Okay. All right.
And you can see in that first path there, it says style, and then it says fill none. Yep. And then it says stroke, and it's got a color, and then a stroke width 5 pixels. That's what all of them have now. And that's why there's no like fill or background color, and there's just like what looks like a border on the actual SVG.
Okay, gotcha. And this is what gets generated from Figma, but if you wanted to, you could clean this up and make that part of like the M CSS class or an additional CSS class if you want. Okay.
Yep. And a lot of times I will do that with different things. I'll just take out, especially like fills, if I know I'm going to animate them and stuff, I'll take them out and I'll just do it in CSS. But for this one, I just left it because I didn't need to take it out.
Yeah. Okay, cool. Gotcha. All right. Okay. So
all right.
You were talking about the elements. So there was the path. There's the hello, Mr. CBDK. Thank you for the follow. Just to talk briefly again about some of the other SVG elements. You talked about path briefly. Do you want to you want to just talk about G and maybe I think those are the only two we're using right now, the G and path.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. So G is when I was in Figma and I was like, okay, I have all these little individual parts and I want to group them together. G is group. So G stands for group. When you group things together, you get that little G element. And then that one that says group ID Forem was when I grouped the whole thing together. So
Okay.
FOREM, and then I gave it an ID of form so I knew where it was.
Okay. Gotcha. All right. Cool.
Yeah.
Okay. And
And if you
then
had something else on here, you like the other elements you could use are like circle or rectangle or ellipse.
okay.
And I don't remember the other ones if there's other ones, but those are you'll actually see those say that, which is a little bit easier to read as far as like an SVG. You're like, oh, circle. I know this is a circle.
Okay.
It will have like a radius, so it would have like R and the amount of radius and stuff.
Okay. In terms of animation, though, it's generally, I'm assuming, just based on what I've seen before and what we're talking about now, like paths would be generally preferred for animations over like a rectangle or a circle, if that's part of that.
Over a lot of animations, I would say, yeah, a lot of stuff that you see happening where like if a line is like moving any certain way or what we're going to be doing, the drawing, it's easier to do that when you have a path versus a whole chunk of like an actual shape. So I do animate a lot of shapes too. Depends on the type of animation. If I was just like I have some animation that I'm gonna be using in my course where we have some like circles and squares just kind of like scaling up and coming in and stuff. I just use the circle and square for
Okay.
those because it's easier to create that. But if I but in general, a lot of times I will just use a path, and inside the tools, the Figma or Affinity or whatever you're using, the way you get a path is by using what's called a pin tool, and the pin tool creates paths versus a shape tool, which will create your shapes.
Okay, gotcha. Cool. Okay, so right now in the code pen here, we have the entire logo with the split up paths with the IDs. Like if I bring this back up, and
Mhm.
uh, like you said, there's no. I guess this is the background of the page. If we look in the CSS, I imagine it's not the back. Okay, yeah, it's over here. Okay, cool.
Mhm.
And that's one of the. I don't know what that color is. I'm gonna say light pink purple, but it is one
One
of
of our branding colors.
yeah, one of our branding colors. Cool. All right, so from here, what do we get up to next then?
Yeah, so I want to create an animation that you've probably seen some animations like this on the web, and this is something that you can do with CSS or JavaScript. I'm going to show you how to do it with CSS first, and then JavaScript is where you uh, draw in the shape. So it looks like someone's drawing the letters in. And let me see. I can't share, but we could see the finished one. I will drop it in the dev stream chat and you can bring it up if you want of what we're going to be creating.
Cool. Did you pop it in the chat? You popped it in the Discord chat?
Yep, the dev stream chat. Yep.
Okay, yeah, that's me just not knowing what I'm doing. I'm just hanging here staring at the stream. All right, let's open that up.
Sometimes it helps to see a finished thing to understand like what we're working towards.
Yeah. Okay, I'm just gonna close this. I've been using Edge as my default browser, which is pretty solid,
Yeah.
but because we have closed captioning, you can only use Chrome for it because they have speech APIs, so my default browser keeps opening. So anyways, okay, so this is loading up, and oh my God, this code pen has frozen my screen. There we go.
Uh, I was like, it's not that bad of an animation, I don't think.
No, honestly, I gotta say it's pretty depressing because I have a MacBook Pro 2019, like the 16-inch one. It's got like I mean I
Mhm.
didn't soup it up, but it's got like 30
Oh, what's it doing to your Chrome, man?
yeah.
We don't have to show the finished one right now. It's okay.
I on my own screen it looks fine, but I can see on the stream that it is going bananas. So I'm gonna switch.
Yeah, it's like there's like a strobe light effect going on. If anyone has any issues with like
Yeah, yeah.
stibular disorders, please look away for a minute. So,
I'm gonna close that for now. I'll keep the link, but
yeah.
that is very odd. I might even actually close Chrome just for a second.
Yeah, I would close it for a minute because it's all of your things happening. There we
Yeah,
go.
that is wild. Hold on. And I'm gonna have to start the captioning again. Give me 2 seconds here. I have no idea why that happened. Okay, so let's load that up and let me just get the web captioner back up here. All right, captioning is back. Cool. That was really bizarre. Yeah, no, we gave a warning, Oscar, but yeah, that was pretty wild. That was like
It's a delayed warning for you all, so sorry.
yeah, I have no idea what was going on there. Maybe it's the web captioning and the animation, but like you said, it's not a super complex in terms of like intense animation,
hmm
but essentially it's gonna draw the entire outline, right?
Right now, I'm just on the screen, so I don't know if you want to put yourself on the screen too.
Oh, man, this is like, yeah, bring my screen back.
It's okay.
It's like,
I was telling my manager, who hasn't seen our streams yet, that we always have some kind of issue, and that's just how it is, and it's okay.
the funny thing is I'm very organized. I have everything set up, and then
Yep.
technology fails me. So, anyways,
Yep.
I don't know. Maybe it's some bad karma from like a past life. I don't know. All right, so we're back. There is no flickering. I hope hopefully no, nobody was affected too poorly by that. Okay. All right. So we want to animate the outlines. That's what we're gonna do, right?
Yeah. Can you see me inside the pin now? Because we're still in the collab mode, right?
Yeah.
Okay, I'm inside the CSS panel now. I don't know if you can see me in there.
I don't see it doing much, but I am in.
Interesting.
I'm assuming it's collab mode by default when you enabled it, or yeah.
Is mine not collab mode? Hold on, let me go back to our actual link for collab mode. We'll get there, everyone.
Yeah.
We're gonna get.
So, yeah.
I'm
So,
in there. I
all right.
see everything now.
I see
Okay.
it. I see it. All right. Christina's hacking my computer. All right. Let's go.
All right. So what I'm going to use for the CSS animation versus the JavaScript one is something called stroke dash array and stroke dash offset. Nick, you and I have talked about this before in our own little pair programming together. But let's go ahead and look at this. So I'm going to apply this to each of the classes that I have. I have classes on the F, the O, the R, the E, and the M letters. So
Okay.
I'm just going to put F, O, E. Okay. And then the M.
It actually looks kind of cool the way you've written it too.
Yeah.
I don't know if that was planned. It's like Christina just brought up the cool factor of the stream by 100 there. So
Uh, it's just so much easier this way. Okay, and then we're going to use a property. You can see, you guys can't, but I can see because I have this like auto thing that you have all kinds of stuff with stroke. You have like stroke dash array, stroke dash offset, stroke line cap, there's all kinds of things. We're going to use stroke dash array.
okay.
And what that does, it's an attribute that controls the pattern of your dashes and gaps used. And so a lot of times if you think with border you can have like border solid or you can have border dashed. Same kind of thing with a SVG is that you can have it dashed. Okay.
Okay.
And I'm going to set it to 100%, but let's look at it as something else first. So this would be like 20 pixels. There you go. Now it's dashed. When it's 100%, as you'll see when I bring in the stroke dash offset as well, everything's going to disappear.
Okay.
Because it's 100% of where it's supposed to like start. So the stroke dash offset, which we're also going to use, it specifies how far into the dash pattern to start the dash. So if I do 100% on both of them, it's going to make it so everything disappears. And then we're going to draw it back in with our animation. Okay?
Yeah.
All right. I'm going to leave it at 20 right now just so we can see what is going on here. But
Okay.
okay, stroke dash offset. The next one I want. And then let's go ahead and put 100%.
Okay.
Okay.
So, and that.
All right. So watch what happens when I put 100% on the other one.
Okay.
Woohoo, it disappears.
No, it's gone. We broke it.
So it's still there. The stroke is just so much. It's gone 100% over on both the where the pattern is, and then also where it starts, that we can't see it anymore. You can also do this with pixels if you know how long your line is. So if you had just like a line and you knew how long it was, say it was like 300 pixels, you could just put 300 pixels there instead of 100%. So you could use pixels or 100% or percentages, whatever you want to do there.
Gotcha. Okay.
Okay. So now I'm going to use a keyframe animation to bring this back in. So keyframe animations are a type of CSS animation you can use. And we are going to start creating one. I'm going to create one at keyframes. And you'll have to go down a little. Yeah, there we go.
Yeah. Okay, cool.
Oh, you got to give it a name. It's important to name your keyframe, otherwise you can't use it. Let's call it draw. That makes more sense instead of dash. Okay. We're going to draw this. And when you do a keyframe, you have a starting position and then where you're going to animate to. So where do you want to start at and where do you want to animate to? If your specific element is already at the 2 position or the 0 position, like where you want it, you don't have to put that part inside the keyframe. So I don't have to put 0% or 2 if I already have it where I want it, which I do. I have the stroke dash offset and stroke dash array. So we're just going to do the other part, which is where we want it to end at. So I'm going to use percentages here because I'm also going to fill this in, but we're not going to do that right now. So right now, we're going to do 100%. And I want to bring the stroke dash offset back to 0.
Okay.
So right now it's at 100%, and we want to draw it in so that it's back to 0.
Okay.
All right. So to actually be able to use this, go ahead if you want to ask a question first.
Oh no, I was gonna say obviously it's not doing anything now because we're not actually using keyframes yet.
Yeah. So keyframe animations are 2 parts. You create your keyframe, and then you use the animation property in whatever you want to actually animate. Okay. So I could put this on just that FOREM, and we'll see everything happening at one time. So if I put it here, let's start there. I say animation, and I use my name. So it's called draw. So we're saying, hey, we want to use the keyframe draw.
Okay.
And then there's several parts to an animation property. Animation's the shorthand. So we have animation name, animation duration. How long do you want it to happen over? So I'm just going to put 2 seconds for now so we can kind of see it.
Okay.
You can, that went fast. We can give it an ease. So right now it's just linear. I'm just going to put ease out so it's a little bit different. And then the last thing I want to do, so if we see it happening right now when it comes in, it comes in and then it goes away. Okay. If you put forwards, it will stop wherever it ended. So that 100% is where the animation will stay at.
Okay.
So right now it was animating in and then it was disappearing because the animation was done. So if you put the property forwards, it's going to stay at whatever that 100% was.
Okay, gotcha.
And then let's slow it down a little because right now it's going a little bit fast, just so we can see it better. We can see our dash offsets going from 100% back to 0. So now we're getting the whole thing drawn in.
Okay. And we talked about this when we've been pairing. As Christina mentioned, she's been helping me learn animations. Uh, Part of the thing with animations is making it look realistic in the sense that like the real world. So like drawing this at like 1 second is not realistic. Somebody doesn't go like this. Well, maybe they do, but it like when you moved it up to like 5 seconds, it definitely gave it a more authentic look to me, like as if somebody was taking like a Sharpie or something.
Yeah. And then the thing that I'm going to do with the JavaScript animation that I will show you all how I do is that I'm also going to make it so the F draws, then the Z, then the O, then the R, then the E, then the M, instead of them all drawing at one time. So instead of having the animation right here in CSS, what you could do is you could take your each individual class. So I'll say F, and then I can put that animation in there instead. So my animation, draw, 5 seconds, and now we just have the F drawing. And then if I wanted to do the O and I didn't want it to happen at the same time, there's another little property you can add to your animation property, which is a delay.
Okay.
So if I come in here and I do O, I put that same animation in, but in between, so it has to happen after your 5 seconds. Your 5 seconds says, hey, this is the duration I want it to happen. And then after that, you can put another number and it will know, hey, this is the delay. So I'm going to say 1 second delay. Yeah, there we go.
Okay.
So we have the F happening first, and then we have the O happening, which is what I wanted. And if I kept going, so if I did the R, then I would do a 2 second delay. If I did, so on and so forth like that. So you have to create your delays so that it's not all happening at the same time.
Okay, gotcha. Yeah. No, that makes sense. And if we wanted to obviously let for example, the F draw completely before starting, we would do increments of 5 seconds, I imagine then.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, well, you could go up in your increments, and a lot of times with animations, what I find is just like playing around, seeing what like feels nice. So you might not want to wait all the way until like it's completely drawn, although like that would make sense if like someone was drawing. But if you're trying to bring something in and you have an animation going, you don't want an animation lasting that long.
Yeah, because
Like
it
5 seconds.
like
5
30
seconds. No
seconds.
one,
Yeah,
no one's gonna stay and watch that animation. So you would want to change that.
yeah.
This is also the thing that's like a bit frustrating with CSS versus what I'll show you with JavaScript is that if you do like come back and say a designer sees this and they're like, okay, 5 seconds is a little long. Can you make this animation happen over, 3 seconds? Okay, well, you change your first one, so it's 3 seconds, and then you got to go through and you making sure all of them are like the right amount of delay as you go on. And
Okay.
with the JavaScript animation, I'm going to show you, it's a lot easier to do that. It's a lot easier to change, which I've been in that situation so many times. I've been thankful that I've been using Green Talk versus like CSS animations to fix that kind of thing. Um, I
Yeah, and
do want to show one. Oh, go ahead, Nick.
I'm just reading from the chat. Link to 20 was saying you could also do, at least in this particular case you were showing,
Yeah.
you could add the delay within all those other ones, but then the delay would be the same. Like they wouldn't be staggered, right? Like it would just be like the first one, they would all wait 1 second and then draw for 5 seconds. They wouldn't stagger, I think. Or actually, maybe I read that wrong. He says you can also do animation delay on each letter and still have the main animation line at the top.
Yeah, so if you, they're saying like in here where I had the animation happening, I could just add the delay instead of
Oh
like
yeah,
putting
yeah, yeah,
animation for each one. I could add the delay in, which yes, you can do that
yeah,
too.
yeah, yeah. Just to avoid the repetition. Yeah, okay. Yeah, yeah.
Yep.
I just need to.
And when I show you all the JavaScript way, I'm going to show you all the one that's a little bit more repetitious at first, and then I'm going to show you how to make it like so that you're not repeating yourself so many times by using a reusable function and a master or a main timeline.
Okay.
So
cool.
Same kind of thing will be happening with that. The only other animation I want to add into this, because it's going to be similar to the JavaScript one, so I want to show you how you would do it with CSS, is that I'm going to fill in the letters as they're drawing as well. So again, you don't want to use background for an SVG. You have to use fill. And I'm going to do this at like 60% because if I waited all the way to 100%, what you would see happen is like the thing would draw in and then immediately like the color would like come afterwards, and it's a little bit jarring. I was playing around with this earlier. It doesn't look very nice. So I'm going to put it at 60% and we'll see how that looks. And I just want to fill it in with a black color.
Okay, gotcha.
I still don't really like how this animates in with CSS, and I can probably figure out something else to like make this better. I didn't have enough time to play with it today. But I do like how it ends up looking when I do it with the JavaScript, which I think am more comfortable with animating in nowadays anyway. So, but yeah, so I would just do that with each letter. I'd go on and either do the delay like Andrew mentioned, or keep going with the animation like I have here for each letter.
I wonder if, just out of curiosity, if you started off the fill as transparent, would it progress to it should progress to the black then instead of just kind of popping
I tried that and it didn't. So I was like, there's so many things today. So a little side note, everyone, I got a tattoo 2 days ago, and apparently I was like putting too much of like the moisture stuff on it, so it got all puffy and very painful. And last night I didn't sleep at all, so I made like tons and tons of mistakes this morning of things that I wouldn't normally make mistakes on, and I will tell you one of them that I did, because it took me until 10 minutes before I got on here with you of like, why isn't this working? I use this every day. Why isn't this doing what I like expect it to do? And it was the worst little mistake. And I'll tell you what it is, just so you all feel better when you're animating when we get to it. Okay. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to comment out the CSS, and we're going to move into JavaScript land.
Cool. All right. Okay. So yeah, I've got the JS panel open now.
If anyone has any questions as we're going through this, also feel free to just like stop, or suggestions, like Andrew put great suggestions as well. Okay. Yeah. So in our settings, just so people know, I can get rid of that one. I don't know if you can go to settings, Nick, but there is a settings. There's a settings panel in CodePen where you can add like libraries like pretty easily.
Oh yeah.
And so I already added GreenSock and a certain plugin called the Draw SVG plugin, which is what we're going to be using.
Yeah.
Oh yeah, so you can see it.
Okay, cool. And this is
so the Draw SVG plugin is a premium plugin, but you can use it for free on CodePen, which is where I usually use it if I just want to play around with it. And what it's going to do is take the kind of the work we have to do to figure out the stroke off, dash offset, and array, and do that for us with just like a short line of code. And so we'll see that in a minute.
Okay, cool.
Okay, so I'm going to show you kind of the longer way you might do this at first. If you're like first getting used to, and we won't have to go through all the letters, you'll kind of get the feel of like what I'm talking about, and then I can show you how you can create like a reusable function instead. So the first thing that I tend to do is if I'm already working in JavaScript, I will kind of keep all of my stuff in JavaScript. So what I had before where like I hid our letters with CSS, I can just do that with GreenSock. GreenSock has GSAP, GreenSock. GSAP is part of the GreenSock animation library, and that's what I'm using right now. And they have a method called set, and set will just set it immediately. Will just set whatever you're saying. So if you said like gsap.set and you had a class that you put in there and you said opacity 0, then everything would go to opacity 0 immediately instead of being like an animation, like a tween that's happening from one thing to the next.
Gotcha.
Okay, so I'm going to use that method, and I'm going to take all of our letters again, which I'm just going to copy from something I had so we don't have to sit there and watch me take all our letter classes. These are just our classes again. You can put a whole bunch of classes in when you're working with GSAP. It's basically like query selector
Yeah. So is it?
in just plain JavaScript. So it's just looking for, it's querying for our classes here.
Cool. All right.
Okay. And then the next thing you do is that you open up a vars object here, and that's where you put the stuff that you want to have animated. For us, this is, since it's in the .set method, it's just what do we want to happen right away? Like what do we want to have changed?
Okay.
So I'm going to do the stroke dash array again, and because this is JavaScript, I can't do like a dash like you would in CSS, so you just camel case it like that.
Okay.
I'm going to say 100% again. Okay. And then we have our stroke dash offset, same thing. It's going to be at 100%. And I'm going to paste that in because I have, oops.
Oh,
What
yeah,
you don't
sorry.
want to do is put semicolons. You want to put commas. There we go.
Okay, cool.
All right, so it's disappeared. It's gone again. Same thing like with our CSS. We just set it in JavaScript instead. Okay, with GreenSock, you can do a couple different things. You can either do what's called a tween, which would be like the keyframe animation, where you have something starting somewhere and going to the next thing. Like so, you have something at opacity 0 and you're animating it to opacity 1, right? Or you can do a timeline, and your timeline will chain multiple tweens. So instead of having to do like a tween and then a tween and then a tween, you can create a timeline and then you can chain on your tweens. And the nice thing about a timeline versus just doing the tween, tween, tween is that it gives you more flexibility when you're changing like the duration of your animation, whether you want to pause and start, replay. They have all these little methods that you can use in that sense as well. And so basically it just gives you more control to use a timeline.
Okay, gotcha. And I had a question about the GSAP API. Can you chain the things? Like if I do gsap.set and then we do what we have here and then I did dot again, would it still continue with those existing selectors, or do you need to continue with another GSAP? Okay.
I really done it. I mean, I have put a dot set in the middle of a timeline, so yeah, you can chain onto it.
Okay.
But you would want to do that with like a timeline, like we're gonna do in just a second.
Okay.
Okay, so this is again showing you kind of the little bit of what a lot of people will do when they first get used to GreenSock, is kind of like writing everything out over and over. So you're going to see that first I set up a timeline. So I give it a variable so that I don't have to write out gsap.timeline a bunch of times if I'm using it over and over again. So I'm just going to say TL, which is timeline. That's what I usually shorten it to. So gsap.timeline is the method we want to use.
Okay.
Okay. So that's what it's set to now. And then from there, I can start creating my timeline. So there is a .to method, a .from, or a .from to. So a .to would go just like the keyframe I showed you, where it starts at one thing and goes to that. A .from would be like if you said, I want to have it at, so it's the opposite. So if you have something at like, you're saying, I want to go to opacity 1, and then you said from opacity 1, it would start at opacity 1 and go to opacity 0.
Okay. Okay, gotcha.
So they're the opposite. And then from to kind of combines that. You start from something and you're going to something else. It just gives you a little bit more flexibility of like what you can add. I don't use from to that often. I know some people who use it quite a bit, but I don't use it that often.
Okay. And what's the reason for that? It's just really not necessary, or?
Haven't really found that much use. I mean, I see a lot of uses for it. I don't know. I just have like my own way of like how I like to animate, and for me, I don't know. It's useful. I use it sometimes. There's not really any reason why I don't use it. I just like to. Most times when I'm animating something, I'm animating to something. Although right now you're going to see we're going to use a dot from and then a dot to.
Okay.
I said that, but that's not necessarily what we're doing right away. Okay. So I'm going to do TL because that's now our timeline. It's our variable. And then so if you didn't have this, you would just do gsap.timeline and then 2. Instead, we're doing TL or dot from. And I'm going to say TL dot from. So I want to go from something and go back to something else. It gets a little confusing. It'll be easier when you actually say it.
Okay.
Okay. And inside there, same way up in the gsap.set, you're gonna pick your element. What do you want? What do you want to animate? What do you want it to find? As if it was doing like a query selector.
Okay.
And let's just do. Hello.
Yeah, that was pretty wild. Discord just stopped.
Oh no.
All right, we're back. Discord pop just died. No idea. We're back. Let me share my. It's like, am I just like having a bad tech day? Like I have no idea what's going on here. It's wild. I even
Tech is out to
rebooted
get
my
us
computer.
today.
Yeah. All right, we're back. This is wild.
Of course, like the whole internet was down yesterday, so
Yeah.
there's that.
All right, cool. So we're back. I mean, people still heard us talking, I believe, because my audio still picks it up. So they just lost the screen for a second. Okay, cool.
Okay, cool.
Yeah.
All right, we're back. And all right, so we're picking the F group, the ones that have the F class on them, which is my whole F letter. Each path had the F class on it. And then I'm going to open up what's called the vars object, and that's where you want to put whatever you want to animate.
Okay.
Inside that, I'm going to use the draw SVG plugin. I don't know if maybe you want to go to GreenSock stocks real quick and just go to the. It's up to you because I know your computer's doing weird things right now.
No, it's all good. It's all good. It's good. It's I don't know what's up. It's like the computer's running fine. Like Discord just said, hey, I'm taking a nap and I'm coming back. Okay. Do we want to just check out the API, or what page do you want me to go to? The docs, or?
We actually want to go to the docs. So if you go up to the top and it says docs, yeah, there you go, docs.
Okay.
And then right in, sorry, go back.
Okay.
If you just hit back to docs home.
Yeah.
There's a plugins.
Okay.
Yep. And then the draw SVG plugin is the one we're using.
Okay.
Okay. I just like to show this because they have like a little interactive example that you can use. So right there you can see it says like you can either use percentages or you can use absolute lengths. And what this is going to do is it's going to take us from wherever we initially have it, which right now we're at 100%, and we want to draw back to 0% like we did in CSS. So if you hit next example on there, I think they'll kind of show you that, like where they're drawing stuff.
Okay. Okay.
Okay, so if you do like 40 and 60%, it's going, and right there they tell you down at the bottom, if you use a single value, it's assumed for a starting value. And then you can also use 2 for like the starting and the end, which is what they're showing there. And then if you hit next example again, you can kind of, if you do it a few times, you can kind of see examples of like where it's going. So they use pixels in that one, 50%, 50%, which would be the starting and ending, going all the way towards the end. You can just put true, which would draw it in. So instead of like going through and figuring out like your lengths and stuff like that, you can just go from one thing to the other, which is why we're using it. It's just a quick way to to draw in our SVG with JavaScript versus CSS. Again, the CSS for this one wasn't that bad anyway, so you could just go with the CSS. But we're going to show how to do it in JavaScript. So if you want to go back to CodePen, we'll go in there.
Yeah.
Okay, so all I have to put is draw SVG, and then what I want to go back to, which is 0%.
Okay, so
you can see it drawing.
Yeah.
Okay, so it went from the 100% where we didn't see it anymore back to 0% so that it all came back. So that was taking the dash stroke, the stroke dash offset and the stroke dash array, and it's doing it both so that you're not having to do it.
Okay, cool.
Okay, and then I also am going to add a little other thing in here so that we fill it in like before. So on here, I can chain on this timeline, like I mentioned. So I can put .to, because I want to go to something this time from our no color to a color.
Yep.
And I'm going to, again, take our element, and I need a dot there. Okay. And then open up our vars object. That's just what they call it, the vars object. Okay. I'm going to give this a duration here that's a little bit different than our other one, which I think might be by default at 1. And I'm going to put 0.5, which just means it'd be half that amount of time. And then fill, and we want to fill it in with black.
Okay.
And see how that one's actually like animating the color in? I don't know why it's not working for me with the CSS. I haven't figured it out yet. I'm sure I will eventually, but I'm just like, why isn't this working the way I expect it to work?
Well, Andrew posted in the chat before, maybe they're just using opacity, like to bring it in. Because like if you have like
maybe.
Like if you have like RGBA or HSL, you can bring in the transparency. Maybe it's not that, but yeah.
Yeah, I'm sure I could ask the green sock guys. They would just be like, or Cassie, who's there now. Tell me what's happening. Okay. So if we were going to keep going on with this, one way you can do this is from like that TL where it says dot from, like I could literally copy and paste this over and over again. So let's just do it just for an example of like, okay, oh. Right. With the timeline, I don't have to add any delays. It is going to go one after the other. So whatever you put there, it's going to go one after the other. You can change that up if you want with something called relative positions or with a label so that it starts like at the same time if you wanted to, or it started even later if you wanted to. Same thing, kind of like a delay in your CSS animations. You can do that with GreenSock, but I did want this to go one after the other, so that was fine.
Okay.
So yeah, you could keep going with this and doing that. That's a lot of just like same code over and over and over again. And with JavaScript, if you're doing the same thing over and over and over again, you could probably do it a better way. So I'm going to comment this part out, and I'm going to show you what this is how I typically create animations if I know I'm going to have something that I'm doing a lot of, and I want to create a sequence of events. So what I would do is I would create a reusable function. So I just create a function. You can do this, if you want to do it more the S6 way too, you can do that too. But I'm just going to do function element is going to be my parameter, because instead of putting each individual, going through and creating the same thing for each individual class, what I'm going to do is I'm going to create another timeline. In a few minutes, you'll see that I can then add just that element to. So it might not make a lot of sense right now, but I'll show you what I'm going to do in a minute. But that's my parameter so that I have an argument in a little bit.
Okay.
Okay. And once again, just going to create the variable for my timeline. I'm going to call this one draw TL just to have something a little bit different because my function is called draw.
Yeah.
And then, so I'm going to set that to my timeline. Okay. And then from there, I can do the same animation that we had before. So draw TL, because that's what I called my timeline, dot from. And instead of putting a specific class in here, like we've been doing, I'm putting that parameter, so element.
Okay.
Okay. And then it's the same animation. So draw SVG. We want to get it back to 0%. And then we want to chain on that the color that we had there too. So dot two. Oops. Again, just put element in here so that we can say what element eventually that we want to put in there.
Okay.
Duration. Same thing we had before. And then we're going to fill it with the black.
Yeah.
Okay, so what I did today that I told you that I kept doing over and over and over again, which is driving me crazy, I couldn't figure out. I kept creating this like main timeline, and what it should have done is like what we just saw, where the F was going, and then the O, and then the R would go if I added that one in. But I created this timeline, and the F and the O were going at the same time, and I was like, what is happening? Why is this happening to me? I don't understand. And I was like doing all kinds. What I did was I didn't return the right thing. For some reason, I returned draw versus draw time, the timeline. So, y'all, it's important to return the correct thing when you're creating a function. At some point, I was like, why did I do that? Anyway, that's what was happening to me today. Right before we got on here, I was feeling a little nutty. Okay, so you return your timeline so that you can then use it again into a main timeline. So that's what we're going to create now. And the thing is, like right now, this might not seem like that big of a deal. I mean, you will see that we do have some saved code, but I could create other functions, which I do a lot of times with my animations. Maybe I have something like drawing in. Maybe I have something that's like a bunch of things are like scaling and doing a couple other things. Well, I'll create a reusable function for that. And all of those things can then be added to a timeline, and you can adjust like when they're happening. So you can sequence when these things are coming in. Versus like all of that other code that I was creating before, where there's a bunch of stuff that was just over and over and over again.
Okay, cool. And I imagine because you've obviously done a ton of animations, like you've done this for work at a bunch of places.
Yeah.
Over time, you probably have like a bunch of go-to functions that you just pull out whenever you're working on a project.
Yeah, I'm just like, oh yeah, that's similar to that one. Let me just do that one and tweak it. Yeah, okay, so we have our timeline. And then what I can say is on my main, I want to add. So this is another method that they have. I want to add. And what I want to add is that draw function. And then inside that draw function, I can pass my argument. So I could have more things like up here. If there was some other stuff, like I've done this before, where like say maybe I wanted to like scale some stuff, but some of it I wanted to scale up to like 1 or some of it up to 2, but the other animations that were happening in between it were the same. Well, then I can pass more parameters up here and just fill it in down here. So that's again a nice thing that makes these flexible, is that you can fill in a couple things. Sorry, I was like pointing at the wrong thing. Up here where the element is, you can pass in, or sorry, up here where the element is, you can pass in more arguments if you want, so that down in here, say if I had, just for an example, if I had scale up here, I could say scale, and then when I add my timeline, I can say what I want it to scale up to. Okay. So that it can be different for each one, but we're not going to use scale. We don't actually want that. So I just want to pass in my element. So in here, I can say F, and then we should see that one come in.
Okay, yeah, and it looks pretty smooth now.
Yeah. That little flash you're seeing at the beginning of the stuff, there is a way to make that stop. I just didn't go through that right now, but the little flash of like what you're seeing at the beginning of the whole lettering, you would normally want to make sure that's not happening, and you would do that by setting everything to visibility hidden, and then making sure it comes back in with the dot set method at the beginning. So if you see that little flash, you might not see it there. I don't know if you're seeing it or not, but I see it. Like it's flashing all the letters that they're getting.
Yeah. Well, I was gonna ask because we're doing this in JavaScript now, so like the markup will load, CSS will load that we have, if any, and then the JavaScript bootstrap. So would that be something, to me, it would seem like that would be something more you'd probably prefer to do that in CSS. So like visually, it's not even showing on the page yet, and then it's the JavaScript that will do it.
Yeah, so normally in the CSS, I would set whatever I don't want to have there. I would set it to visibility hidden in the CSS. And then inside my like dot set method that I have, which I don't have. Oh, this is why it's happening right now. It's because I got rid of that. Let's see if they'll make it go away.
Okay.
Because it should have set it immediately. Oh wait, no, wrong thing. Never mind. I keep looking at two different code pins and I'm really confusing myself. Sorry. The flash that's happening. Normally I would set in my CSS. Sorry y'all for that confusion there. In my CSS I would put visibility hidden, and then inside my JavaScript I would make sure I set it. There's an auto alpha property that you can use. So you could say visibility visible, but there's an auto alpha that will take like both the visibility hidden and like opacity and bring it back. And a lot of times I'll just use that one because it's just easier to chunk that in and throw it in there. But and that will get rid of that flash that happens at the beginning.
Okay. I'm just laughing because my kid's school is on strike and I'm troubleshooting passwords for her on the left while you're talking. So I am listening. It's just she's like in a Zoom call and she's like, I need this password.
Oh no.
So I used to work in internet technical support, so I'm doing okay. But anyways, yeah. So there's still you see the flash of all the letters still.
Yeah. Yeah, and we can go through and try to get rid of that together in just a minute. Just wanna put these on so that you can see what's happening. Okay, so there I put the next one on. Again, I could just hit add the next thing there. And the reason I'm adding each one individually is so that they are happening at different times. Like you could, just like you were able to put like FOREM up here, you could just pass all that into your either your actual timeline up here if you wanted to, or into your main if you wanted to. But I want each one to go one after the other, which is why I'm doing it this way.
Okay, cool, gotcha. Yeah. And I
Okay,
guess
let's see if I can make that flash go away.
yeah, I'm guessing if we let me show. Yeah, I've got the CSS panel squished at the moment. So let me just drag that over.
Okay, so visibility is hidden in my CSS, and since it's hidden, you're not going to see it come back in, even if it should be animating. So we have to set it back to visible.
Okay.
And so in my JavaScript this time, I'm gonna set it there. I'm gonna use auto alpha and hit it to 1 in the dot set method. And what did I put? Oh, semicolons. Gonna be the. Okay.
My daughter's still struggling with this password. it's like stressing me out, and my eyeballs are gonna be stuck to the left. I've got anyways.
It's okay. If you go up to the top in the JavaScript panel.
Oops. Yeah, we got all that.
All the way up. Yep, just go all the way up. There we go. You can see I put auto alpha 1. And then again in the CSS, I made it hidden, the visibility hidden there for that FOREM. And so now if you refresh the page, let's see what happens.
Yeah. Hopefully Chrome does not decide to close Discord again.
So this time you didn't get the flash of the letters. And that's what I typically do. Anything that I want to animate in that should be like invisible at first, that's that's how I handle it. I do visibility hidden and then I bring it back in. Or opacity 0, technically you could use too, but I tend to just use visibility hidden.
No, that definitely makes sense because the JavaScript always comes after. So like, I don't think you really have an option if you want it to look good. You have to do that part in CSS. There's no escape
Yeah.
from that, I think.
There's like a on load, like to wait for like your stuff to going type stuff in like JavaScript, but again, you'll still have the flash unless you're like hiding stuff first in CSS versus like setting it back in JavaScript. I think the only other thing I kind of want to show is one, we can add the rest of the letters on here so we see it, but I will show you like just a few little other things you could do kind of within this animation to make it look a little different. I'm going to add the letters real quick that we need in here. It's just adding them. So we want R and then E and then M. And we can make this look a little nicer.
Okay.
It's going to flash a couple times as it's trying to load all that stuff probably, but there we go. Okay. The other thing that I liked on here, which I didn't do in here, is that for the fill, I kind of like it staggering in like the fill within each letter because each letter is like broken up into parts. If you use the JavaScript stagger property, you can make that happen pretty quickly. So inside that .2, if you go back down, I know you're doing password stuff, so it's okay. If you go back down in the JavaScript panel.
I'm just laughing because the plot thickens. I thought she was upstairs. She's over at her now, so she's not connected to Wi-Fi on her computer.
Oh.
I shared it in one. Anyways, it's all good. It's all good. Okay, so we got the
If you go back to the draw function.
yeah. Oh wait, where is it? Okay, yeah.
Okay, right there. I'm going to add in a stagger property, which you can do a lot with. Stagger properties you can get pretty advanced with in GSAP. You can add all kinds of things. You can add your own easing to your staggers. You can use a property called amount, which will take a number and divide up the staggers from that amount, or you can use something called each, which would apply the amount of time to each individual element within whatever you're trying to stagger. I'm going to use amount here so that it happens kind of fast and just splits it up. And I'm going to put 0.2 seconds.
Okay.
Okay, so you can see it kind of coming in fast. Now everything's staggering in.
Yeah, it's like
the other thing that I realized that I didn't like, but I could keep it this way and that would be fine. But what I would want was like the top, like the F from the top down to animate in. And for that, you actually have to go in, and this is where you have to like learn either how to like make sure that this is happening before you export or how to actually move it around in your HTML, which I can do right now. I'll just do with the F just so you can see like how you would do it. So if you go to the HTML panel.
Yeah. Try it out. It's just a little more difficult because I have it zoomed in quite a bit. So
yeah, it's okay. You can also change your view so that it's like on the side versus like having your forem on the bottom. So if you go to change view.
Oh yeah. The
big button, and then the first like editor layout. That's the one I typically use. Yeah, there you go.
Okay. That makes more sense. Okay, cool.
Okay, so we're gonna have to scroll all the way down to the bottom because that's where the F is.
Just an added benefit since we're working with SVG, you saw that the SVG is scaling when I shrunk the side there. So
yeah.
Okay, so here's the F.
Yeah, and because I did name these before, F1, F2, F3, I know which one should be first. I also saw it when I was animating. What happened was the thing at the very bottom animated in first and then next and next. So what I would just do is I would take my path within my group. You want to keep it within like your group, and you can just move it so that it's like where you want it. So I take the first one, the second path, and I'm just moving them so that they're one after the other instead of starting at the bottom. And I would go through and I would do that with all of them, or I could go back to my editor and do it in my editor if I wanted to, either way. And again, that was just a preference. I'm like, if it's going to be animating, staggering in like that, it should start from the top and go down to the bottom. But it's really a preference of like what people want.
Yeah, no, but it's a good point showing that, because essentially the order of the markup, it does matter in terms of how you want some things to animate. If you
Yeah.
want to make it simpler.
Yep.
Okay.
And it's something to be aware of. Like if that happened to be like on the top, like something was on top of it, it's the same as kind of like if you think of the Z index, like it will change like the layers. So it's the layers of like the SVG. So if I had like something like an eye on a face and I moved the face so that it was on top of the eye would be behind the face. So you just got to
Okay.
keep
Yeah.
that in mind too if you're moving stuff around. But yeah, I think I think that's like all the animation there.
Yeah. That's
How was path generated? Someone asked. Path was generated inside the actual SVG editor that we used, Figma. So
yeah.
if you create, you can create paths in there. Nick can't do it in his because he's just in the view mode, but it's something called a pin tool, which you'll have in any kind of editor that you use for SVGs. And those pin tools create paths. And then you also have a shape tool, which would create a shape if you were doing shapes instead of paths.
Yeah, and for those, because I know some folks jumped in late on the stream, Christina was mentioning at the beginning of the stream, when we were in Figma, that uh, when you're animating things, you don't typically what'll happen, or not typically, but sometimes what'll happen, like you'll get an SVG and it's like one entire path. So like if you see me clicking on here, you see they're like individual pieces here, but sometimes it's the whole thing together, and you can't animate that because it's literally like one HTML element with like if we come back and see
Yeah.
here, it's like one long path, like all these numbers between M and Z here, it's like they all are in one path element, and so it's unmanageable in terms of animating it. So sometimes she mentions when she's working with a client or something, she might have to, kind of dissect it to break it into pieces. um, and
Yeah, and if you're working with a designer and they're able to, that's something you can mention. Like a lot of times when I've worked with designers, I've told them like, if this is what you want me to animate, then I need you to make this into like, these need to be separate paths type of things. One of the like really popular things people like is Undraw, where you can get
yeah,
SVGs from, and I like getting them from there too. But a lot of times what I've found is when I get them from there, big chunks of things that I would want to animate are just like one big path blob, and so I have to go back in and actually trace the SVG and like create the actual paths that I want versus like what's actually there.
yeah,
A lot of their SVGs are fine and you can use them as is. It's just like a lot of times I get kind of like, I want to animate this part of it. Well, I can't do that because this is all just a big giant path, and that happens a lot with a lot of these types of things that you get kind of like for free, the SVGs.
yeah. No, and I mean, I guess like the intention of these SVGs that were made, though, that the intention wasn't necessarily for them to be animated. It's just free
Exactly.
scalable images. So um,
Yeah.
and it is a great resource. I've used them before. And
Yeah, one that I like, it is a paid one, um, but it's called, let me find it. What's it called again? Oh, did I forget what it's called? It's called Shape. Um, the reason I like it is because I actually worked with this designer and he's also a developer, and he made these things so that you could actually like animate them pretty easily. So anytime I grab stuff out, they're usually like a path. I can send you an
is
it's
this it?
called it's shape.so.
Yeah, yeah,
Is
yeah,
that where you're at?
yeah.
Okay, yeah. Yeah, yeah. So the you can actually export them as like React components too and stuff like that. But
Okay.
when you're in there, the SVGs are usually pretty broken up already, like in a way that I know that I can animate because I know this person was actually a developer. I worked with them, and so that was one of the reasons
Cool, cool.
I got that one. But, yeah.
Nice. Cool. Well, I think we're looking. Let me check the time. We're getting close to time here.
Mhm.
Maybe we can just do just a real quick recap of kind of all the things we touched on today. I don't know if you want to go through that or if you
Sure.
want to attempt either way. No, you get. I'll let you go ahead.
Yeah, so we talked about first, like what I would do when I got an SVG initially, how I would look at it, decide like what parts of it I might want to animate, and then I would group those pieces together if I needed to. So like for our Forem logo, if we have an F, an O, an R, an E, and an M, I grouped all the little paths that were in the F together so that it was one group, and did the same with the other letters. It's going to change depending on what kind of SVGs you have, but in general, you kind of want to go through. If you had something that had like a face, you would probably want to group a face with the eyes and the mouth. Those things are just because if you're going to move something, you want to be able to move the whole group versus
Yeah.
moving each individual part separately. Like you would have to say like, okay, rotate head, eyes, nose, instead of just saying rotate head if you had grouped that whole thing together. And then when we exported, we looked at how to make sure you're exporting with your IDs, so whatever you name your stuff with, and then also optimizing it before you bring it into an editor.
Okay.
And then we looked at how to like animate with CSS, how to do this animation with CSS, and then how to do it with JavaScript, which we used GreenSock JavaScript library. It's a popular JavaScript animation library that I use a lot.
Yeah. I'll drop the link to that again.
GreenSock itself is free, and it already has a lot of tools with it. They do have some plugins like the Draw SVG plugin that are premium, meaning you have to pay for them. But if you want to use them and try them out, they're always free on CodePen.
Okay, so it's on CodePen in general. I couldn't remember when we talked with CodePen folks about it. I thought it was just for the premium account, but it's free for
Mm.
like everybody using CodePen. Okay.
Yeah, and you used to have to like go to this special like pin and grab the CDNs, but now if you just go to settings in the JavaScript panel, you can find all of them right there and there if you start typing in like whatever plugin you want. So if you went to like a new pin, I don't know if you, okay, yeah. So right there in the search, just go ahead and hit GSAP, like put in GSAP,
Okay, and then we got
and
it.
then you'll start seeing a bunch of plugins start popping up.
Oh, cool, cool.
Yeah.
All right, nice. Cool. Well, I guess now's a good time to call it then. Thanks for the whirlwind tour. I'm really enjoying. I know we've been a little busy lately, so we haven't been able to pair it as much, but I'm enjoying learning animations, and it looks like a lot of fun. Definitely. I think there's a line you have to decide when it makes sense to use CSS animations versus going with something like GreenSock.
Yep.
But I think typically you tend to for anything that's somewhat complicated, you always go for GreenSock, I imagine.
Yeah, and I do that not just for myself. Like, yeah, for me, it's a little bit easier to use, but when I'm working with a team of people, like, it's easier for them to manage too, versus like if they wanted to change something, the CSS is going to take them a lot more to like go through and try to change versus the flexibility you get with like Green Socket. So I've found like working with teams, they prefer that when I've worked with them is working with Green
Okay.
Sock.
Yeah.
But if I'm just going to do like an animation, like hover animations or even I showed you some when we paired together of like some where you could like hover and you can have quite a lot of stuff happening, like say you had like a card that's like small and then it grows and brings in more information and stuff. Like I would still use CSS for that. I don't have to bring in like GreenSock for that kind of thing. But if I'm doing like some kind of animation like this logo, I probably still would just do a GreenSock versus CSS.
Okay. Cool. Cool. All right. Well, thanks for everybody that popped by today. Just a heads up, next week we have Cassidy Williams from Netlify joining us on the stream. We're going to be talking Next.js and probably goofy stuff too. I'm sure something about mechanical
Memes.
boards
I
will
don't
come
know.
up. Memes, yes, memes. Yeah, her TikTok cracks me up. I'm like always dying when I see them. I'm sure you've seen it, the one with the Reply Guys. I think it was one of her first ones.
Yeah.
It's really funny, but also at the same time, it's like Reply Guys. But anyways, so yeah, Cassie will be joining us next week. So pretty excited for that one. And yeah, we will see you all next week, folks. Take care.
Bye.